Welcome back to The Discoverers. This is Chapter 71, Revising the Record. Christian history, like Christian geography, authenticated church and state. Rulers were quite content to be legitimized by descent from the Trojans or the gods. Revising the ancient views of the earth promised rich rewards. European sovereigns were willing or even eager to finance Columbus, Gama, Magellan, or Cabot to stake out claims on land and sea. But by recharting the past, they could only lose. There, they preferred to leave well enough alone. Why substitute uncertain facts for authorized legend? The past, which lay everywhere and nowhere, still was a treacherous no man's land with no papal lines to separate competing empires. The prudent sovereign was glad to see his lineage safely shrouded in myth, what might not be uncovered by fearless scholars. The printing press increased the perils. It is not surprising that Cosimo de' Medici exercised a special censorship in 1537 through 74 over historical writing, or that Queen Elizabeth made trouble in 1599 for the author who too freely described the dethroning of her predecessor Richard II. A kaleidoscope past might conjure up visions of a changeful future. Renaissance Italy would be Europe's first headquarters for exploring the past. What Portugal was for adventures and geography, Italy was for history. And Florence was the Sagres. When St. Augustine had drawn the lines of the Christian future, the Italian poet-humanist Francesco Petrarch from 1304 to 1374, in the advance guard of the Renaissance, was a pioneer explorer of the past. He was inspired to a modern sense of history among the same spectacular ruins of the Roman Empire that would inspire Gibbon 4 centuries later. During the whole Middle Ages, those monumental relics had excited very little curiosity in residents, scholars, or travelers. Few questions were asked about who built them or how they were built and how those ancient people lived. They were simply marvels of the city of Rome, as an anonymous writer of the mid-12th century described them, notable only as sites of pagan myth and sacred legend. Quote, "There is an arch at St. Mark's that is called the Hand of Flesh," the marvels reported. For at the time when in this city of Rome, Lucy, a holy matron, was tormented for the faith of Christ by the Emperor Diocletian, he commanded that she should be laid down and beaten to death. And behold, he that smote her was made stone, but his hand remained flesh unto the 7th day, wherefore the name of the place is called Hand of Flesh to this day. End of quote. Ancient buildings themselves were a kind of sacred scripture. When Petrarch first visited Rome in 1337, he spent many pleasant hours wandering through the ruins with the Franciscan brother Colonna for his guide. For him, these ruins became clues to strange ways of life, which he reconstructed in a long letter to Colonna, and in a poem about Scipio Africanus describing Rome in its days of glory. The inscriptions on stones became explicit messages from the past, and he scrutinized old manuscripts for other clues. In 1345, in Verona, he discovered numerous letters from Cicero to his fellow politicians, which transformed the wooden classroom figure into an energetic public man whose observations were the byproduct of Roman life. He used coins as a historical source that helped him understand a puzzling passage in Suetonius. Whenever a hoard was newly unearthed, it would be brought to Petrarch for interpretation. He considered his extensive collection of Roman coins a portrait gallery of Roman emperors, and he generously offered a selection to Emperor Charles IV to show him the faces of the Roman Caesars, whom he must imitate. When the Holy Roman Emperor Charles IV, 1316 to 1378, was troubled by an old document that purported to exempt Austria from his domain, he turned to Petrarch, who proved the purported grant to be a forgery. Quote, "I do not know who wrote it," Petrarch concluded in 1355, "but have no doubt that he was not a learned man, but a schoolboy, an ignorant writer, A man with the desire to lie, but without the skill to do it properly. Otherwise, he would not have made such stupid mistakes. End of quote. Petrarch noted that in the counterfeit document, Caesar spoke of himself as we, although in fact he always referred to himself in the singular. He called himself Augustus, although this term was first used only by his successors, and he dated the document, quote, Friday in the first year of our reign, without any reference to a month or day. Forgery was a prosperous medieval art. Battling feudal lords and upstart kings eager to substantiate the antiquity of custom were anxious for the tangible authority of a document. The increasing use of written records increased the need for authentic grants, quote unquote, and the Roman law crime of forgery was limited to cases of property or inheritance. Forgery of documents to support an acknowledged authority was generally considered an act of piety or patriotism. Before falsifying historical documents could have the opprobrium of forgery, it was necessary to believe that the historical past was not a flimsy fabric of myth and legend, but had a solid, definable reality. The courage to discredit the fictitious past would be a symptom of rising historical consciousness. The pioneer of modern historical criticism was a peevish character, more fertile in posing embarrassing questions than in supplying comforting answers. Lorenzo Valla, 1407 to 1457, enfant terrible of the learned world, was an apostle of truth in history. He might be better described as a Paracelsus of literary learning, a professional layman, the enemy of pedantry, a priorism, and quiddities. Born in Rome, the son of a lawyer at the papal court, before he was 30, he had outraged the scholarly world. He attacked Stoicism, defended Epicurus, and ridiculed the barbarous Latin used by Bartolus, 1314 to 1357, the revered authority on Roman law. Driven from the University of Pavia, he found temporary refuge in Milan, then in Genoa, before settling down in the south as royal secretary and historian to King Alfonso of Aragon, who was then engaged in staking his claim to the kingdom of Naples. The political needs of King Alfonso provided the occasion for Valla's most celebrated feat of historical criticism. Against King Alfonso, Pope Eugenius IV was claiming secular authority over all of Italy. The Pope's claim was based on the so-called donation of Constantine, contained in an old document in which Emperor Constantine the Great, around 280 to 337, purported to grant to Pope Sylvester I, 314 to 335, and his successors temporal dominion over Rome and the whole Western Empire. This was said to be Sylvester's reward for his miraculous cure of Constantine's leprosy and for converting Constantine to Christianity. During the Middle Ages, this unchallenged document had become the most potent weapon in the arsenal of successive popes against kings and emperors. Valla now had an opportunity similar to that seized by Petrarch a century before to serve both his patron and the cause of history. The occasion was made to order for one of his iconoclastic temperament. His treatise on the donation of Constantine in 1440 so conclusively proved the document to be a forgery that few champions of papal supremacy ever dared appeal to it thereafter. Drawing on his profound knowledge of changing Latin usage, Valla demonstrated that the document could not possibly be genuine. The forger was so ignorant that he did not know that in Constantine's time, a diadem was not a gold crown, but a coarse cloth. That tiara was a word not yet in use. In every line, he found flagrant anachronisms: purple, scepter, standard, banners, and even the word employed for or, along with words borrowed from the Hebrew which Constantine's secretaries never could have known. And this ends part 1 of chapter 71.